All right, greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller. We'll be joined as always by the one and only, the esteemed Graham Doran. Our New Year's resolution to do this on Thursdays quickly went up in smoke or quickly went up in snow as my daughter was off school for the first 4 days of this week. We live in a freaking Banjo Kazooie level. Yeah, there's fire in California. We're under snow. Basketball's still happening though, so got to take my shot. Gave it a little more of a backboard. No, not even close. We're gonna get better eventually. Oh, now I pissed off the dogs. Great. All right. So Graham, what have you been up to, man? I mean, I know you don't have to worry about the Fairfax County public school snow delays, but how's it going over there?
Yeah, about a little bit better than you, just because the kids have actually been able to go to school here. But yeah, just kind of trying to brave the snow and figure out something to do when it's way too cold to be doing anything outside.
Dude, that picture you sent me of the bracket that you guys drew in the snow. That's perfect. Did you set that as your Twitter header profile
I
photo yet?
really
You got to
should.
do that.
Yeah, I drew a bracket into the snow, and it actually turned out pretty well. So I might have to keep that one.
It's perfect. There was no denying what it was. But all right, so it's January 10th. We are what 64, 65 days away from Selection Sunday. We are now past the halfway point. Half the season is done. Hard to believe it. We're going to talk one seeds, of course. We'll do our current state of the bubble. I'm going to guess we mostly agree on one seeds, and I'm going to guess we mostly don't agree on the bubble, as it should be in mid-January. And then we'll each nominate the highest seeded team right now that we think reasonably could miss the tournament, and the team furthest gone from the field right now, who we still think has a realistic chance. But right on to the one seeds. Where are you at right now? I'm going to assume we're both in unanimous agreement. Auburn number one overall, but even at number two, I think it starts to get interesting.
I like Duke at number two overall. I think they have really strong metrics across the board, 5-2 against quad one. So I feel pretty good about. Actually, I feel really good about Duke at two overall. I think it gets more tricky at three overall, where I have Iowa State. Their metrics don't necessarily point to a one seed, but I do think just the quality of the team that we've seen really matters in this particular case, especially how close they played Auburn and the fact that they do have that Marquette win. And then I'm wondering if we're actually the same on this. I don't know if we are. I just moved Alabama to my fourth overall number one seed, and I do think that one's a really tricky call.
Yeah, I like Alabama. I still have Tennessee at four overall. And I think if it wasn't for Alabama, I would have Florida at number four overall. Because right now I go Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, and I think if they were right side by side, that blowout, individual head-to-head result would make the difference. I still have Iowa State ahead of Duke, even though, as you said, their metrics maybe don't quite support it. I think they're seventh in the net. Resume average like 8.7, qualitative average around 7. Like, yeah, that's not an open and shut case for a one seed, but their only loss was on a neutral court to Auburn. I think they've looked really, really good. I don't know, and I think if the status quo were to remain, if they do win the Big 12, I think that's going to be worth a whole lot more than Duke winning the ACC. Granted, we're not projecting that in what we're putting in there right now, but yeah, I have no argument though against Duke at two overall. It's more of a keeping the status quo thing for me, where I don't drop a team unless I see any good reason to. So I still have Iowa State there, but yeah, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, that second Big East or Jesus, second SEC team, definitely not second Big East team. It's a tough call. And even Mississippi State is in the mix. I have them as my top three seed, not quite on the one seed line yet, but it's crazy. We're in college football world, man. I think like nine of the top 17 are SEC teams. Although it is getting interesting around the bubble with the SEC. How many SEC teams do you now have in overall? Because I've dropped a few out just based on the first two rounds of games within that conference.
I actually haven't counted how many teams I have there. So, to true selection committee fashion, it's based on the team, not the conference. So, I legitimately don't even know. I'd have to do the math on that one. But LSU is no longer in my field, and I don't think they're ever going to get back there. Texas is no longer in my field, and I'm starting to question whether they're going to get back there. It seemed like they would at some point, and now it's kind of up in the air with the Longhorns. Missouri actually just moved back in for me, and Vandy is hanging in, just barely has a spot for me as well.
Yeah, I'm the same. Missouri's my first team out. I have Arkansas just barely out. Texas is out. LSU is out. Obviously, South Carolina is out. So I'm pretty sure I'm down to 11 teams from the SEC. I still feel like 13 is a realistic possibility, and it's not surprising that there are a couple of teams who, have started out 0-2, and that's hurt their resume temporarily. But I feel like if you go 7-11 in this conference, it's going to be good enough this year. And just some teams obviously did not start right on that journey. But where do you think the SEC will end up in the end? And believe me, I hear you. You're judging the teams, not the conference, but gut feel.
Uh, 12 sounds right to me, but there's the other part of it where I'm like, Arkansas is my fifth team out, and I don't know that they're going to get back in there either. They're 1-4 against the top two quadrants. I think a lot of these teams didn't do a whole lot outside of the conference, and now they're at the point where they better be beating Florida or Tennessee or Auburn or Alabama because they just don't have enough outside of it to sustain those spots. So I think it's 12, but I would definitely go 11 before I'd go 13.
That's fair. I think that's fair. We'll see. It'll depend on, if LSU actually does bottom out as it's looking like they might. Obviously you're a Big 12 guy. You're familiar with the days when TCU and Texas Tech were just the garbage that the teams could beat up on. And I think it helps to have at least some sort of basement. You don't want everybody to be, going 500. So if LSU and South Carolina go a combined whatever it would be, like 1-30 against the rest of the conference, then that definitely sets the stage for 12, 13 teams getting in. But we'll see where it's at. The bubble right now, my last five in, going from safest to least safe. I still have Dayton somewhat safely in, even though the metrics do not support it at all after their recent loss to UMass and their 20-point loss to George Washington. Like they have thrown away all the goodwill they built up in Maui in non-conference play. After that, I have New Mexico, St. Mary's, UCF, and shout out to our boy Anthony Schneider. Iowa is my last team in the field right now. Just the classic bubble resume. Winless against quad one, undefeated outside of quad one, basically 50th exactly in every metric. They are the bubble team du jour. What is your last few teams in right now?
Very similar. I have Missouri as an 11 seed, avoiding Dayton. And then I get into my last four. I have UCF, who's really not looked that great recently, but they still have those quality wins against Texas A&M and at Texas Tech. New Mexico, who's really good against quads 1 and 2, although that UCLA win is not sticking out quite as much as it used to. So that's something to monitor. They really need the Bruins to keep winning to make that look better. Then I have Iowa, as you mentioned, typical bubble team. Iowa always seems to be in this spot. And then I have Arizona State now re-entering the field. I had Arizona State out of the field even as of yesterday, but now we've had a couple of different results with Ohio State and Washington State that changed placement.
Yeah, Washington State absolutely free falled. I think I had them fifth to last in my last projection on Tuesday morning, and now I don't even. You lose at home to Pacific, I'm done with you. You got to beat Gonzaga before I give a shit again. So do you have New Mexico in? Who do
Yeah,
I? Oh,
I do have New
trying to
Mexico
figure
in.
out trying to figure out who you have in that I don't have it because I have Arizona State just barely out. My first five out: Missouri, Arizona State, Arkansas, Boise State, and Creighton. Um, I think Missouri and Arizona State are very, very strong cases, and then it drops pretty far to Arkansas as my third team out. It's kind of weird, right? Like you get to like the 8, 9 seeds, it's like none of these teams belong in, and then you get to the actual bubble. It's like, oh, I really want to get these two teams in there. I feel like they're good enough.
I think where we're probably different is you mentioned Dayton as being a team that you have
Yeah.
in the bubble. I just have them as my A10 qualifier because I had to have somebody from the league
Mm.
qualify. And I know most people put whoever's first place in the conference. I just put in whoever I think is the best team or the one that's most likely to win the conference tournament. So I have Dayton there, and I think that's why we're off. Ohio State is my first team out. They're now 2-6 against the first two quadrants. Great win over Kentucky, dominating win over Kentucky. But at some point, you just have to win more games, and they're just not doing that. So I think Ohio State, some real concerns for the Buckeyes that they're just simply not winning enough. Then we get to St. Mary's, St. Bonaventure, Creighton, and then I have Arkansas as my 15th out.
Yeah. St. Bonaventure, man. I I had them in, then they lose to St. Louis, and then I have to put St. Louis in, and I don't want to have three A10 teams. It's just I'm very impressed with what they've done. I don't know if it has anything to do with Adrian Wojnarowski or what they're doing over there, but um I think they do have a chance. I agree. They're close. I would probably have them as my sixth team out right now. So let's move on to the, oh, by the way, the Ohio State part is where we definitely differ. I still have Ohio State as like a 10 seed. So Dayton and Ohio State, apparently you just hate the state of Ohio, which that's fine. Go ahead, hate on Ohio. I don't care. Um, I'm going to pull up, see if I remember how to do this, share my screen thing to get our old friend, the bracket matrix, and we'll discuss here we go, here we go, here we go. Vamping screen two, bracket matrix. There it is. Share. Did I figure that out? I think so. So this was from the 7th. What was that? Tuesday. So this is 3 days old at this point, although the matrix is always a little bit in arrears, if you will. But based on what we're seeing here from seeding, who is the highest seeded team that you think is liable to miss the tournament? For me, Pittsburgh stands out. I don't think that they are a 6 seed anymore. This obviously was before their loss to Duke. Not that a loss to Duke is bad, but I think Pitt is probably more in the 8 seed range right now. But who was your pick for your current highest seed that you think will not necessarily will miss the tournament, but is most likely to possibly fall out?
So let me preface this to say I think this team is very, very likely to make the tournament. But could I see Memphis dropping out again? We just saw it last year. They do have 10 wins against quads one and two. So I think they've already pretty much done enough to earn that bid. But something that happened to them last year, at this point, I had them as a 3 seed. I'm not quite sure exactly where you had them as at this point, maybe a 2 seed. I know for a while you had them on the two line. Sometimes those wins just get worse. And it's not that you've done anything, it's just the wins don't look as impressive as they did at some point. Memphis could potentially run into that issue. And then if they do what FAU did, which is lose a bunch of the games in the American, all of a sudden it could get dicey. I actually had FAU in my last four in last year, and they ended up getting a better seed than that, going to the 8 line. But I think Memphis could potentially, if we were identifying one team that's pretty high up in the bracket that could free fall due to a variety of factors, it would be Memphis.
Yeah. Am I now successfully screen sharing Memphis's Ken Palm
Oh
profile?
yeah, the 12
All
and
right.
3
Yeah.
title.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I do a radio hit every Thursday morning in Memphis, and I've been saying that like they look good. They look better than last year, right? At this time last year, I think they were around 50th on Ken Palm, but had a great resume metrics. So yeah, I had them as a 2 seed before. I think I have them as they're either my last three or my top four at the moment. But obviously that loss to Auburn, no big deal. The loss to Mississippi State would have been nice to have. Doesn't hurt. Mississippi State's either a 2 or a 3 seed. The home loss to Arkansas State, even that's not bad. The problem is everything left on their schedule is quad three or quad four. So I hear you. That's an interesting pick. I did not go that high. I would have said either Ole Miss or Oklahoma, who I believe are both in the 6 range. Ole Miss is a 7, Oklahoma's a 6. Um, Yeah, I mean Oklahoma, you've been kind of down on the Sooners all along, even as they were starting out whatever 12-0, 13-0. They hadn't proven much of anything, and then took that loss to Texas A&M, blew an 18-point lead, just absolutely pissed that game away. I don't know how much of it you actually watched, but they were just Texas A&M wasn't even like forcing turnovers. Oklahoma was just giving the ball away. It's like they don't even want to be in the tournament. It's ridiculous what
Well,
they were doing. And without Wade Taylor in that game for Texas A&M, that's insane. So I could see it does feel like it's going to be an SEC team, right? That just goes 5-13. Even if they're pretty good, you could absolutely crash and burn in that league.
yeah, I would have identified Georgia as that team before they beat Kentucky. Now, they look in much better position, but beforehand, I was thinking about Georgia as being that team. Oklahoma has had the opposite of the Memphis effect that we just talked about, where your wins look worse as the year goes on. All of a sudden, Oklahoma's non-conference wins look great. You're just seeing all the teams that they beat. They were already quality wins, but they were quality wins over a team that might be fighting for the tournament or as a 7 seed or something like that. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got to win over Michigan. I've got to win over Arizona. Louisville's looking better. Like these are terrific non-conference wins at this point. So Oklahoma, I think, is in a much better position from a non-conference standpoint than they were even 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they're 3-2 against quad one. They don't have any losses outside of that group. 46th in the net, 21 resume average, 43 predictive metrics. Like it's not bad, but it is similar to where Memphis was a year ago,
Well, I mean,
across the
let's
board in
remember
terms of metrics.
last year Oklahoma was 4-12 against quad one, no losses outside of quad one. But this year they're almost surely going to pass that, even if they're not as good as last year's team, simply because they've already banked some wins that are certainly going to stay quad one. So I think Oklahoma's probably going to make it. I don't think they're going to be a high seed in the tournament. I think they're going to be down towards that bubble range, but they would just have to monumentally screw up at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think they will get in. That's the point where I'm going through my C's. Like I think I have Gonzaga like at 21 overall, then Ole Miss at 22, Oklahoma 23. Like that's where I'm just like, I'm not fully convinced you're going to get it. Like if we're going, if we had to lock in teams at this point in the season, like there are about 20 teams I would feel somewhat comfortably saying are locks, and I think that's just about where I stop feeling that comfortable.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's probably closer to 15 or 16 teams that I feel really can't miss the tournament realistically at this point. But I think that says a lot about college basketball. The fact that we get to this point and we have a pretty good idea of where teams stand. I actually did a little research on my bracket from this time last year. And of the top 10 seeds, exactly half of them ended up getting that exact seed on Selection Sunday. So
Oh
all of that
wow.
is to say, we have a pretty good idea of where a lot of these teams are going to be pegged at the end of the year because we already know from their efficiency and their resume the sort of trajectory that they're on. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of these teams end up exactly where we have them right now. On the other hand, some of those teams made massive free falls, including Memphis,
Yeah.
Utah, at this time last year looked like an NCAA tournament team. They completely disappeared from the conversation. So there's going to be some teams that truly tank, and that's going to be the fun is seeing who those teams are.
I'm pretty sure when we did our first ever pod, that was like the first subject that we hit on, and I'm pretty sure we singled out Memphis and Utah as two of the teams we didn't believe in, and then they fell off. So we know something. We've been doing this long enough. We have some general idea of what we're talking about. To the opposite end of that spectrum, though, teams, the furthest gone team right now, a team that realistically is not a legitimate candidate for the at-large field right now that you still think could get in. So kind of the either in this, maybe not even, Penn State, obviously New Mexico. How is New Mexico only in 8 out of whatever 50 some fields? What is wrong with people? I would say San Francisco, VCU, and Wake Forest only being in 1 out of 52 fields. That counts. And I don't know who has Wake Forest in. I should have looked at this beforehand. I assumed nobody had them in. because they were my pick. I think Wake Forest could sneak um, in part due to the lack of anybody aside from Duke actually being good in the ACC, in part due to the fact that they have no losses outside of Quad One. Their resume metrics are reasonably solid. I think they're like 85th in the net, but their resume averages, I wrote it down, 45.7, which usually that's about right on the bubble. So I think they have a chance. Who would be your team that is just not in the picture now that you think will be?
I have kind of been banging this drum for a little while at this point. I think Villanova is
Mm.
massively undervalued as an at-large contender. I think a lot of people just wrote them off after they struggled in the Big Five, and from then on, I mean, Eric Dixon looks good, 26 points a game, right? Like they have one of the best offensive efficiencies out there right now. I think Villanova, if you look at them, nothing great really stands out. Even the UConn wins, not that terrific. It was at home. And they do have a couple of bad losses, of course, from the Big Five. But the path is really manageable because the Big East is filled with a bunch of teams that can be quality wins, but aren't overly difficult to beat. So I could definitely see Villanova getting themselves. And I'll say this: are they an at-large contender right at this moment? No, not if we're going to bracket today. Not close to the field. But do I feel like they're probably as good of shape, if not better, than anyone outside of UConn, Marquette, and St. John's moving forward in the Big East? Yeah, I think so. I think Villanova is that fourth team for me from the Big East that can make the field, even over teams like Creighton and Georgetown.
Yeah, I also wrote down Villanova and Xavier kind of from the same. Xavier's 0 and 6 against Quad One. They have a lot of work to do, whereas Villanova, if they were to win this game against St. John's tomorrow, all of a sudden they're right on the cusp of the field. But kind of the same idea where you were going with, where there are a lot of teams where you can get good looking wins that aren't that tough, right? They almost look better resume wise than they actually are to get. Like even this year win at Georgetown, right? That's probably a quad one game. I'm not sure where Georgetown's at in the net, but that's a game that if you're going to get in the tournament, you should be able to win. A game at Providence should be able to win. Games against Xavier or Villanova if it's one or the other. So yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity there. Kind of the same thing I was going with Wake Forest, where just the league as a whole isn't as strong as it should be, and it feels like somebody is eventually going to get propped up just by being the fourth best or fifth best team in that conference.
And to your
Um,
point about the
yeah,
A10 earlier, right? You didn't want to put three teams from the A10 because it seems like too many. The committee could kind of have that same exact feel about the Big East in the opposite way. They don't want to. I know they don't want to give the Big East three bids again because they think they're a better league than that. They will be looking for a fourth team if they can put them in.
yeah, and I think it's more likely to be Creighton than it is to be Villanova or Xavier, even though like I'm not high on Creighton. I think they have enough talent. They have at least what are they 1 and 5 against quad one? Like they're not too far gone. But yeah, one of those three will join Connecticut, Marquette, and St. John's in the field. I would be surprised if it is a three bid Big East again. And then our last topic, and I hit you with this like 5 minutes before we decided to start. What is the game of this weekend that you are most looking forward to? Whether it's just you just want to watch it because it's going to be fun, or from a bracketology standpoint, preferably the latter, but I don't care.
Well, this is going to sound because I'm a Kansas guy, but really, I think it's Kansas at Cincinnati. I genuinely believe that. And I think it's even more so on the Cincinnati side than the Kansas side. They really need this one. If they go 0-4 in the Big 12 and did the thing that they usually do, which is not play a very difficult non conference schedule, I think they're going to miss the tournament. I think this is a really, really big game for Cincinnati. On the opposite side, I think Kansas, it's the difference between are you a 2 seed contender or are you maybe like a 4 seed, 5 seed type of team? I think this is that sort of game that swings that momentum one way or the other. So, really important game for both teams, but particularly for Cincinnati. They just will have a really big hole to come back from if they can't pick this one up.
Yeah, that would have been my second choice if you had chosen Kentucky at Mississippi State. I think that's the biggest game. Mississippi State, right? I don't. Do you have them at 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere in that range, where they're right? If they win this game against Kentucky, like they're going to have an outside case for a 1 seed, even though thus far they haven't really pulled off very impressive wins. I think they seem like more of a paper tiger at the moment, but they could shut us up entirely by beating Kentucky. And conversely, Kentucky after that win over Florida, right? Felt like they were a 2 seed. Then they turn around and lose to Georgia. If they now lose to Mississippi State as well, like they drop into that 4 or 5 seed range. I think I have them at 13 overall right now. So yeah, I think that's a huge game. Pretty much any weekend you can just like point to three SEC games though, and it's just absolutely massive. Are we gonna try and get together this weekend? Is your driveway fully shoveled? Can we do this?
It, most of the way shoveled. We can make it work.
It's crazy, man. And now like so it only snowed like Monday into Tuesday. Like it was done by midnight Tuesday morning, whatever you want to call that. They should have gone to school on Tuesday. They absolutely should have gone to school Wednesday and Thursday. And now today, like the snow is melting and it refroze. The roads actually are treacherous now. I wish they hadn't gone to school. Just give us the whole week off of this. Whatever. We'll get together. We'll watch some of these games and then we'll be back with another pod next Thursday when the entire world has changed again. Take care.